Hey, Brett. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody out there in Internet land. I'm Carl Herberger, VP of Security Services for Cybersheath, and I have with me today Brett Powers, Director of our Security Operations, our SOC, and everything that has to do with our managed security services portfolio. Good morning, Brett.
Hey, good morning, Carl. How are you?
Great. Today we're going to be talking about SolarWinds and the SolarWinds hack. As most people know, this was a supply chain attack, and I thought we would dive into the who, the what, the where, the why, and for that matter, what we're doing here at Cybersheath for our customers, and how to think about this going forward as a defense industrial based customer, and what the new world means. So, Brett, you're going to be, I know that you put out a bunch of information from us, and I just thought you would educate me on what happened. So talk through this SolarWinds hack. I would really love to understand, how big was it? What did we learn in the beginning? And where are we now with it?
Yeah. So this is pretty interesting because so SolarWinds, it's network monitoring software, really widely used, for years now, with a lot of high-profile organizations, right? And
It's a funny
what?
thing, right? Because the news reports seem to suggest that SolarWinds is a security company, but I've always known them as an SNMP trap,
Yeah.
like SNMP company. And I even see some people referencing them as a security incident and event management solution. Maybe you can dive into that just a little bit. Why why
Yeah,
that, why is that?
Yeah, so I mean, again, I think SolarWinds, they monitor a lot. I think traditionally they're a network monitoring company, and then I think as the security has become hot, a lot of companies I think are out there trying to rebrand or get into, the security kind of marketplace, and because they are already everywhere on the network, I mean, this is kind of goes into why, if you're a threat actor, why they're such a juicy target, because they do see everything, right? So they're typically deployed all across networks, taking in network information, which can then be used, on the security level too. So I can understand, them branding themselves as a security software company.
Hmm.
I think the interesting thing though is that it was another security company, FireEye, who actually made the breach public, and released that report, showing how SolarWinds was used to breach their network.
Wow.
So again,
So
yeah.
you're telling me that actually that SolarWinds was not forthcoming in their initial release. It was FireEye that did the notification initially.
Yeah, so that was the interesting, I think the interesting part of this, and apparently SolarWinds was compromised early 2020, and the attackers were able to gain access to the SolarWinds network to add a backdoor in their software library. And then FireEye was a customer of SolarWinds, and they in turn got breached through this. So,
Wow. So
and
hold on one second here.
yep,
So you just said some pretty big things to me. What
yep.
you said was this is about a year old in its making. And when you say that their network was breached and libraries of their software were breached, doesn't this go to the core of who SolarWinds is when their actual kernels of their software is breached? You So I just want you to react to both of those things. But I think, are you saying that the attackers had 1 year worth of a foray into the SolarWinds environment and customer base?
Yeah. So that backdoor was deployed through updates to the SolarWinds customers, and then one of those customers was FireEye, and apparently they noticed the breach, and then doing an investigation of their breach. I think that's how it was traced back to SolarWinds. So yeah, so this is your I don't want to say classic supply chain attack, just because this is, I think this is unlike anything I think we've seen before, where a major software company, not only was there access, but it wasn't just access to take IP, like you see a lot of times in the past. That access was used to then change the software to create that backdoor, knowing that then the software will be deployed to all these major organizations who utilize that software, and then again those threat actors then exploited that. So very very complex, and a high risk but high reward attack in the case of these threat actors.
So how are we to see this now going forward? Like, given something like that, if I am a SolarWinds customer, or had been a SolarWinds customer, shouldn't I believe that I have been not potentially violated? Shouldn't I go under the assumption that I was violated?
Yeah, and they've released the versions, and I think Orion versions, I think 2019.4 through 2020.2.1 are potentially affected. So, but again, in not fully knowing until, I think there's a question of when this attack did happen, and if, waiting to see, to go through the code to make sure there's not other backdoors. But yes, companies need to assume that they were affected if they use this product, and then put in the required, detections, and also, take that, unfortunately, take that software off their network, right? To make sure that breach
So
doesn't occur.
how would I know? Is there a way for me to reasonably gain a quick understanding of whether or not the same thing that happened to FireEye happened to me? Like, what is it that we can do as a customer of SolarWinds to be able to quickly remedy and gain visibility whether or not we have an issue?
Yeah, so if you're a Microsoft customer, which many are, they put out a few things, actually a whole page dedicated to this incident and remediation steps.
Well, where's that
But
located?
actually, we should post a link to that in the chat. But it's on the Microsoft blog. It's the SolariGate Resource Center for Microsoft, and basically through their different products. So Defender HTTP, they've put detections in Defender HTTP to detect for this activity, and the SolarWinds software. In Azure Sentinel, there are queries, analytics rules that can be put in to, again, detect that same activity. So they move pretty quickly, and I think for our customers who use Microsoft products, we're able to deploy those really a day or two after the announcement. As and again, at first, the way this first came out, as I mentioned, FireEye kind of announced that, so everyone kind of looked at FireEye, but then realized, no, it's actually SolarWinds that was the culprit. So I
And I
mean,
was one of the people that was early to say we need more details on the fire. It was nice
yep.
that they came out, but they didn't give initially any details about when they found this out and what had happened. And what you're beginning to find out is, as you begin to find the details, you understand this is a nested web of problems that has been introduced to customers of these companies. And I think we still have some chapters to continue to read on these hacks and begin to understand exactly what's going on. Okay, so I upgrade my systems. I now have these advisories I go through. I begin to understand the scope of my problem. This is indicative of something that could be also in place on any supply chain, right? These vendors that have very wide and privileged access to your environment. What do you think are the correct steps to evaluate if those vendors are doing the right thing, if they have proper shoes on the cobbler's children?
Yeah, I think this is a very difficult question, right? Because a lot of these are big companies who are probably not, who have, probably your standard security compliance like SOC 2, type of reports and compliance things that they'll in turn provide to clients if they ask. But for a lot of smaller clients, I think this may be a turn in the industry for where companies that are deploying software inside of a company have to provide more visibility into controls. Again, this is really widely used software in both across not just commercial, but in the government as well, right? So my understanding, and so that there's going to be a lot more scrutiny on what just like when you're healthy, what the ingredients list is and what you're putting in your body, right? So there's going to be a lot more scrutiny on what companies are putting inside their network and what those pieces of software have access to.
So let me ask you two things on this. How do you believe CMMC as a maturity model and a regulation will drive change? That's the first question I have
Mhm.
for you. And the second is, how do you feel being responsible for network and security management operations on behalf of many, many customers, 4 or 5 dozen customers here at CyberChief? How are you looking at making certain that this doesn't happen to our customer base with the vendor selections that we have and so forth? So, between what the regulations are requiring in the defense industrial base, the US, and what in addition to that are you looking to do to source vendors to make sure that they don't seem to have these problems?
Yeah, so from the CMMC standpoint, I think it's very timely, right? Because I think what CMMC is starting to do for our clients is help them identify what information that they have is valuable to them. And we've had multiple discussions on, and like tools like SolarWinds are useful. We have a lot of larger organizations which they don't really have a lot of critical information, but what critical information they do, we've talked about putting that information into an enclave, right? So then, you can fully vet the software that's in the enclave. Things that you're not like quite sure about, but maybe useful, maybe just don't put it in the enclave. So if something does happen, they now don't have access to what that critical information is. And so these are things that I think CMMC is driving to get clients to think about the information they have in different ways and be able to, kind of put that more critical information somewhere and that is someone that has a higher level of security.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, for our clients, I mean, it's been again having that CMMC standard to lean back on. We're kind of I don't want to say ahead of the game, right? But we're prepared. We have the right partnerships to be able to as I mentioned, kind of deploy the controls and detections to detect something like this. And we're always having these discussions with our clients on that critical information, where to store it. And a lot of our, I just had a discussion right before this with some of our clients who are now thinking about that. They want to buy a new tool, but before they may just, hey, this looks great, let's just procure it. Now we're getting more and more questions like, oh, what do you think about this? This is the access that it has. This is where they deployed it. This is where it's made. So there's a lot more scrutiny now, I think, with clients due to this, and we're able to be there for them and give them guidance on the questions that they have, because no one wants to be a victim of this type of attack.
That's perfect. That's really great. That's a nice overview. Brett, give me a feeling if I was a customer, the top 3 things I should be doing if I'm a customer of CyberChief, and the top 3 things maybe that I should be doing if they're different if I was not a customer of CyberChief, but was considering CyberChief, a prospect, if you will, of CyberChief services.
Yeah, our customers, we talked about with our customers about this, time and time again is, let's talk about defense in depth. Let's talk about, there's a bunch of great tools out there, but let's figure out, where your information is, how we can apply those tools, not just rely on one tool to do alerting, but let's truly, make you secure. And then I mentioned before, like, for that information that is CUI, identify that. And, and sometimes it is painful because some clients are like, we have it everywhere. We don't know where it is, and working with them to determine where that CUI lives, and you know, if it makes sense, put it in an enclave, and then that's another major control that you know, that can be implemented. And then as far as, you know, clients who aren't cyber sheath, I mean, it's really the same type of advice. I think we kind of have always said this over, going back 20 years, you know, that you know, layered security, layered defense, make sure you have monitoring as well. I mean, this is something where I think managed services are becoming more more popular, not just for financial reasons, but you know, a lot of times companies will buy these security tools and they create alerts, and then they'll just tune down these alerts, and then something happens, and then, you know, no one's watching, right? And that's kind of where, you know, you have to go back to SolarWinds, and those are questions I think being raised to companies like SolarWinds is like, how did you not see this, right? Like, what were your controls? Who is monitoring? So it goes back to these basic blocking and tackling questions, which, you know, I know everyone's busy operationally, people are busy and they don't have time to look at alerts. But unless you really start focusing on this basic blocking and tackling, I mean, there are great frameworks such as MITRE ATT&CK. There are great tools out there. You know, we've made investments into Azure Sentinel and Defender ATP, which have really helped us and our clients identify and be able to remediate threats. But unless someone is looking at them and maintaining that, you know, it's just kind of you know, an expensive doorstop, right? So
yeah. Brett, thank you very much. I feel much smarter today than I did just a few minutes ago, telling me how this happened, how we found out about it, the massive magnitude and scope of it, and how you go about remedying it. I really appreciate it very much. Hopefully this has been useful for everybody out there in internet land. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to write us at either marketing at cybersheath.com or through some of the links off of our website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.